What's up, guys? Recently, Teal did a video, Feminists Don't Understand Medicine, and I want to focus on something he mentioned very briefly towards the end, talking about feminists and women in general being opposed to male birth control. And there are two issues I want to tackle here. Male birth control, that is, attitudes towards it, as well as something else, something that people don't really think about very much, because, frankly, it's absurd. And the truth of it is only belied, in fact, by its absurdity. In the Western hemisphere, and indeed probably in every industrial nation, although I don't want to generalize, I'm not familiar with each one, but certainly in every Western country, every time a man decides to have sex, it sounds absurd, but it's true, he is consenting to become a father. That is, the sex act in the industrialized Western nation is paternal consent. He might not be thinking about that, and perhaps he's never even heard of these restrictions, or rather these circumstances that he is placing himself under. But the fact of the matter is, and we don't think about it in these terms, but every time you choose to have sex with a woman, whatever the chances might be, and whatever the outcome might be, whatever you think about how unfair it is, you're choosing to become a father. Now, I understand that sounds absurd. No, I just wanted to have a one-night stand. I just wanted to get my nutsack blown, whatever, get my rocks off. I get that. But as far as the state is concerned, the legal gods are concerned, and indeed the power and position the woman is in, every time you engage in the sex act with a woman, you are consenting to become a father. Your thoughts on the matter are irrelevant, and this is another reason why I think it's probably a pretty wise policy to, this is just my own opinion, to be very circumspect and cautious about who you have sex with, etc. Even if you have sex with a prostitute, you're still consenting to have, and it's very unlikely a prostitute would want to have someone's child, although I can imagine a bunch of scenarios, some wealthy patron coming up. But even in that case, you are essentially consenting to become a father. Now, this is directly related to the issue of male birth control. Now, Teal pointed out, and all the links to the things I'm talking about as well will be below, in the low bar as usual, that women, some women, and many feminists, and I would argue probably many women as well, this is my own view, really understand and realize the power of reproductive control. They understand that that is an immense power to wield. And Barbaros had pointed out that Andrea Dworkin, the late great Andrea Dworkin, kidding, had mentioned this, and she understood the power dynamics between the male and the female of our species. And it is true that some women will occasionally say, oh, it would be such a relief from this burden of taking birth control, because birth control affects my hormones and my skin and all these things. Okay, they're probably, I know for a fact there are a couple of women who feel that way. But I would argue that these women haven't actually thought through the prospect of wide-scale birth control being put into male hands, in the sense that it represents a cutting off of the power dynamic. And now some of these articles that I'm linking to show you that some women who are quite outspoken about this, go on record and say, no, it wouldn't be a good thing. It would be a really bad thing. They talk about happy little surprises that aren't quite surprises. Let's call them unsurprises. The stark reality we live in is that the potential of wresting control of reproductive power from women is massive, in the form of some sort of safe and consumer-friendly male birth control. And many women realize this, and I think that most women who think that it's just a pain in the ass would realize what relinquishing that power would mean. People in the past have, these women who published these articles and commented as well. And I mean, this is well known that women lie and cheat when it comes to pregnancy, and many women see it as a viable means of entrapping a man. If women were to lose that power, that they would lose a tool in their arsenal. Now, I'm not claiming that every woman would do this and every woman is without scruples, but the potential exists. And let's go back to one of the main points I was making. Every time you choose to have sex, you are choosing to become a father. It sounds absurd, I know, but it's true. The woman has a state behind her. She has her own will. She can do whatever she wants. You have to become a father. And I'm posting a link to this. There are cases where women will just use in the case where the father actually wants to be a father or participate in the child's life, he's denied access because the woman just doesn't really feel like it. So women can do whatever they want with their bodies and with their offspring. Every time you have sex, you're taking that risk. It's a chance. You're consenting to become a father, essentially. Sex is paternal consent in this context in the West, in westernized industrial nations. Now, there's another aspect I want to talk about in this, is that I'm deeply skeptical about the wide-scale application of male birth control, and not because I don't think it's viable or on a physiological level or anything like that. It's much more of a sort of intuitive, observational thing. We know that women control the majority of household income and spending, and they're generally regarded as sort of the matriarchs of the house, right? They run things in the house, and the man, in a traditional blue pill setting, the man runs out to work and brings home the bacon and blah, 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 blah. I think part of the control of the household is control of reproductive health and decisions. So we see in many blue pill situations men deferring to women in terms of what they should be doing. Should they be mowing the lawn? Are they allowed, I'm using this term loosely, allowed to read the newspaper or take a couple of hours off, meet some friends, play some computer games, whatever? The woman often delegates tasks to her husband. She decides for him. Even if we were to have some kind of prominent and efficient birth control, you really have to consider that, as most blue pill men simply defer to the authority and the preferences of the woman, even if a man were on birth control to sort of save or spare the woman the inconveniences of hormonal discontent, as it were, she probably would say, "Okay, honey, it's time to have a baby, get off the birth control." And he would just nod his head like a good little dog and probably would go along with it. I've seen this time and again in other scenarios. Men caving in time and again to what their woman wants. And of course, a lot of this is just to sue for peace. Cheaper to keep her in a certain sense, because if you don't do what the woman wants, she's going to cause hell. I don't really see, where I see the strength of male birth control potentially is in preventing that potentiality of in the random sort of unfamiliar situation of unhappy surprises, essentially. That with male birth control, you are taking back that potential. That is to say, now, at this stage of the game, every time you have sex, you're consenting to become a father. Now, you're still, with male birth control, because it wouldn't be perfect probably, consenting to become a father, but you would have that much more control, and then in addition to condoms and what have you. The status of that we live in, that this absurd notion that every sex act means paternal consent, there's not much we can do about that. But as far as domestic application is concerned, and in quote unquote real relationships, I'm not talking about one night stands. I see the application of male birth control as being far more applicable to the sort of random hookup culture that we live in, more than it is in long-term relationships. Because in quote unquote LTRs, as I think they're referred to, women usually have most of the power. The man is allowed to do, allowed in air quotes, to do what he wants occasionally. And that's particularly true of reproduction. And more importantly, women know the power of having absolute influence and authority over reproduction. So they can just decide to take the pill, to not take it whenever they want. And some of these articles mention these happy little surprises that weren't quite as unplanned as they claim. I've spoken to Nico Chomsky. I keep on getting that wrong. I wonder who's called him Nico Chomsky. Anyway, and being a medical doctor, he told me there's no way a woman can get pregnant if she's on the pill unless she deliberately messes it up. End of story. So the moral of the story here is that male birth control will be, at best, probably another additional limiting factor in preventing people in child support agencies from stealing your money. Because despite the legal status of paternal consent every time you have sex, you might be in a better position to prevent it. Of course, vasectomies are great for that as well. But vasectomies aren't quite as simple as people make them out to be often. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Hear all kinds of stories. And in the relationship marriage situation, let's face it, men are going to keep on getting married. We know who, in the modern era, who the man defers to. And that deferral will be in the case of financial matters, household chores, as well as reproduction. At best, I could see women saying, okay, honey, I don't want to take the pill. You can take your pill. And that might have adverse side effects on men. Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. And when she chooses to get pregnant, she'll say, okay, time to get off the pill. We're going to have a baby. And then he'll just nod his head in rapt agreement, and that'll be the end of it. I guess the thrust of what I'm saying here is that male birth control is going to have far less impact than people think. I mean, I've said this before. I'm pretty skeptical about the sort of societal and political implications of birth control because a lot of women, once again, they realize it's not good for them in the sense they're going to lose control, lose power. And men have this tendency to just to defer to women's wishes in the modern era that we live in. And most importantly, gentlemen, never forget, every time you have sex, you're consenting to become a father. It's absurd, but it's true. Anyway, I just wanted to bring this up and talk about it briefly. I will be making some videos on nutrition quite soon, and several requests, and there are a lot of topics covering that area. So everyone, once again, thanks for watching, and take care. Bye-bye.